Morning, chums. How are you? I'm all right, thank you. Today, we'll have a lovely week. Nice to have your company, basking in a glorious bit of sunshine here. And it is lovely to get out and about, isn't it, in the sun, even if it's just for a short moment in time. Apparently, though, over here in London right now, we're going to have a couple of nice days. Yeah, I love the way they phrase that as well, don't you? You know, on the weather, they say things like, oh, you know, look out for a couple of nice days. And you sort of think it's like teasing a new box of chocolates where you can have the favourite one and then very quickly the rest just left to languish, aren't they? Let's just embrace it while we can. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're all keeping well. Today, you know, what I wanted to focus on was this particular incident. And what's interesting, you know, as a lot of people often ask me when they see me, and people are fascinated by the complex character that is, of course, the former royal known as the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. And what's fascinating here is, you know, I see a very complex character. There's no two ways about it. You see, what I find very odd is that she always sort of puts this theory out that she's a feminist, you know, a radical woman stretching out there for womanhood and place at the table, all of that sort of stuff. You couldn't find any more of a doormat than you could really with the former royal Meghan, because, you know, she gave everything up. She literally just relinquished everything, changed religion. She would do anything for the one simple reason she was marrying rich and powerful, so she believed, you know. And this was like, she couldn't honestly believe it. According to people that knew her at the time, former friends that have now been dropped, of course, you know, there you have this woman who's thinking, that's it, now people are going to respect me. It's nothing new. We've seen this over and over the years of people marrying big magnates and stuff like that. But what's interesting when you look, say, back at, let's say, take Joan Crawford. When she married the Pepsi Cola boss, she'd already got a very established career. So by the time that she'd married Al Steele, they were on an even keel. You know, she didn't necessarily want anything from him. She'd done everything, but of course it kept her in the limelight. There was, of course, this wonderful guy, a big cheese on Pepsi, living in a Park Avenue apartment. What's not to like, you know? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? The role reversal is when you come to a party like Meghan has with very little money and very little prestige, one or two crummy bit parts that you've now built your career around, and basically saying, I'm a huge Hollywood star. She was never Hollywood. She was never that. That's the reason really why Gwyneth Paltrow's kept a very side distance, albeit very politely in that recent article. But as I told you in another video, there's a reason why Gwyneth decided to even, you know, broaden that out, as it were. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because obviously, as many people know, the Queen very generously, kindly, graciously was more than welcoming to Meghan. And so much so that she suggested to her that perhaps she might want to keep her career. She'd seen this itchy feet before with her own sister, Princess Margaret. You know, Margaret wanted to do many different things, and suddenly, you know, she got bored with the sort of royal life and thought she'd try this, she'd try that, but she always was in the parameter of that royal life. Meghan had never actually done that. But Harry, you know, Harry assured Her Majesty the Queen that actually Meghan didn't want that life anymore. She'd achieved all she wanted to achieve. She's a farce, right? Because clearly she wanted an Emmy, a Golden Globe, a Tony if possible, an Oscar. There were many things that Meghan wanted, and Harry was just another path to achieving that. Now, as I've often said before, I'm not a critique of that, because I've worked with many people who are desperate for those sort of things, the power, the glory, the prestige of winning, you know, another Ivy or whatever, you know. It doesn't matter. As Marilyn Monroe famously said, you can't cuddle up with a career at the end of the day, right? So there's a lot to be said for that. But what's interesting is exactly how Meghan really got this particular event wrong. And when she found out the truth behind the scenes, well, things were radically different. And as one can imagine, not at all what she thought it was going to be. And then, of course, this was a huge test for the former royal known as Prince Harry, because, as he famously said, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. But she couldn't quite get this particular thing. And this was the problem. Of course, the bigger problem was the nemesis next to her. That was Catherine, the Princess of Wales, otherwise known at that point as the Duchess of Cambridge. Now, it's fair to say that Catherine had settled into royal life very well and was really a wonderful ambassador, as I've said before, not just for monarchy, but of course for the Commonwealth and the world. But Meghan felt that she was dull, boring, and more importantly, she was there to shake things up. And this particular event in July 2019, inside the Odeon Lux Cinema in the very heart of Leicester Square, was the whole purpose of how Meghan saw her rebirth. And Harry was about to deliver it. Or was he? Discovered footage from their visit to the Lion King premiere in London in July 2019, 6 months before they left the British monarchy, openly shows Prince Harry asking for acting work for his wife. Now, what's interesting I find here, chums, is he asked the film's director, Jon Favreau, if anybody needs any extra voiceover work. Well, Meghan then, butted in and said, that's really why we're here. It's the pitch. She wanted to present it as a joking way, not as a desperate, I'm really looking for some work, But then Harry chipped in and said, well, just not Scar. And this was really a reference to the evil uncle in the movie The Lion King, who tries to steal the kingdom from Simba. Yes, that's an important sort of aside there. It was meant to be this wonderful glitzy night, as it were. Now, another separate clip also shows Harry touting his wife's voiceover skills to the Disney boss Bob Iger at the very same event. Now, I've met Bob, and obviously he's going through difficult times right now with Snow White. But during that very much quiet and hushed conversation caught on camera by a bystander, the prince gestured towards Meghan and said, "You do know that she does voiceovers." And this kind of threw Bob off guard because clearly, this wasn't exactly the plot. But what really was interesting was the fact that he quickly gathered himself and obviously being very polite and used to people pitching to him in the most inexplicable places. Well, then he thought, well, okay, right, So very quickly he knocked this together and said, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that, And Harry was pushing and pushing and pushing. Now, he must have known this was going to be picked up on camera. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But where it got really interesting was, Harry wasn't letting go. Meghan, now still listening with one ear, had moved down and was getting, the sort of glory from the people that she would have been, well, even on the outside a few years ago, basically being ignored. But now she's got Jay-Z, she's got Sir Elton John, all of that sort of stuff. Beyonce looking in front of her. She couldn't quite believe her luck, as you can imagine. Now, where it gets really interesting for me is obviously behind the scenes, this is what we saw at the premiere, but behind the scenes, things took a turn for the worse because Harry wasn't really happy, or should I say, Meghan wasn't really happy with exactly the outcome. There should have been a date, a sign or something like that when this was going to be happening, And as Bob Iger famously said, oh, I didn't know that. And, Harry then says, well, you seem surprised. She's really interested. Now, the Disney chief added, well, we'd love to try. That's a great idea. Just leave it with me. This is a premiere event, a major event in London. And that's the reason why he pushed it aside. Months after the event, though, it was announced that Meghan had signed a voiceover deal with the Walt Disney Company, oh yes, in exchange for a donation to the Elephants Without Borders, a wildlife charity that helps track and protect the animals, from poachers and extinction. Nice thing, you would think. Now, again, the seemingly celebrity networking by the couple had occurred while they were at that particular premiere. And this allegedly should not have happened because they were working royals and forbidden for making money from that commercial activity. Now, what's interesting here is Meghan didn't care about that. She wasn't interested because basically, she was going to be stood in front of a slew of powerful executives, celebrities at that event. And that was simply too tempting for her to walk away from. So she brushed shoulders with the big names, as I say, like Beyonce and Princess Diana's friend Sir Elton John. Well, what wasn't going to go her way? And on top of all of that, she thought, well, now is the time to get this thing together. Mr. Iger, still remains one of the most powerful people in Hollywood due to the fact that he had a massively long-running reign as the Disney chief executive. But the thing is, Harry's remarks at the event really were very much sort of against what people would imagine. It just didn't really work. Even Mr. Iger's wife, a former TV presenter, Willow Bay, literally was stunned by the fact that this very much respected royal is now touting like a 10%, 20% agent at this event. All of this was fed back, of course, to the royal household and to great dismay. But here's where it gets really interesting and what a lot of people don't realise behind the scenes, because as I said, there was a party after the screening and Bob Iger was there and Meghan was stuck next to him like super glue. She was not going until she kind of got what she wanted, which was recognition from him and, more importantly, going to get something from him. You see how this works. Now, what's interesting, when the video clips were first revealed in January of 2020, those elements of what I've just told you were not included because they were sort of moved away in order not to embarrass them. As a senior royal pointed out to me, well, the problem is, it just didn't look good. And with the Queen in very much ill health at that point, there we've got somebody, talking away about trying to get work outside the royal family. Normally, in that case, you would have had that. You see how that works? Now, here's the thing. What a lot of people don't know, that Disney premiere was a big deal for London. It was going to be bringing in a lot of money, big stars, lots of hotel stays, lots of fans outside. Disney was spending big bucks. This was a big event. But originally, you see, and this is where it gets really interesting in the dichotomy of this particular story, when Harry and Meghan were offered that invite to the Disney premiere, they had no idea that in fact they were not first choice. And so Meghan was absolutely delighted. Suddenly somebody's offering her this wonderful opportunity, not only to go to a premiere, to be seen, walk the carpet, everybody adore her, all the things that, every actress, as I said, not knocking her, but every single actress who's ever wanted to be famous and become successful has dreamed about. The white light, the Oscar, the searchlights, it's all of that. That's the gig, right? That's what you sort of aspire to. Unless you're a character actress and you just want to act because you enjoy the role. This was not Meghan Markle. So she figured, wow, the royal family are entrusting me with this. I'm not letting this opportunity go apart. She schooled Harry very much inside Kensington Palace about exactly what she wanted him to say. He'd never done this before. So what we saw was this ad hoc sort of thing of desperately trying to get what Meghan had said right. But he was failing miserably, because it's not the way you pitch to someone. You present them and you basically say, we're a huge fan of your work, and if there's any opportunity that we could possibly get together and work on something, we would be delighted to have a chat, maybe come round for lunch. Would have been far more impressive to invite Bob Iger and Willow Bay to Kensington Palace. But Meghan didn't want that. She didn't want to waste time with dinner. She wanted to know if there was going to be some interest that moment, that day. You see how that works. But they didn't know, literally, just before the event, and this is what they found out, and as ever, we have to say allegedly, was the original invite was in fact for William and Catherine. I kid you not. You see, what Disney wanted, they were spending big bucks and they wanted a royal premiere. Ideally, they would have loved Her Majesty the Queen, but that wasn't possible, sadly. And then, Prince of Wales, King Charles, he would have got far more press. But what they were hoping for was the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And, this makes perfect sense because obviously, they've got young children. It appeals to that demographic. Harry and Meghan at that point, not quite there. You see how this works. But sadly, due to a clash of diaries, this invite came in too late and there was no way that they could move anything around. Let's not forget, though, that Harry dumped a British Army event in order to attend this premiere. That's how much under the thumb this guy was even then. He was willing to dump that event. As ever, we have to say allegedly. And what's fascinating even more so when you look at this particular situation, shall we say, to put it kindly, then they go, they literally find out that they're not the first choice. Apparently, behind the scenes, Meghan absolutely hit the roof, but very much calmed down and saw this as a second opportunity. Well, if they weren't going to go, we have to make it work for us. So consequently, what was just going to be a normal premiere thing suddenly concocted into this pitch of, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to build this back. And so consequently, that's the true story behind exactly why Harry, some people might say, rightly or wrongly, was forced into pushing forward. Now, where, as we know, this Borders Without Elephants, or whatever the Disney voiceover was called, was something of a damp squib, wasn't it? It didn't necessarily pan out to the thing that Meghan thought was going to be. She thought this was just an entree into the door. You know, she was looking for those big voiceover things, you know, the Frozens and all of that sort of stuff. That's what she thought was going to come through. Now, a lot of mystery surrounding the donation, the payment, whatever. And some incredible work has been done on that by many other people who've looked into it. You know, Disney have kept their, shall we say, powder very dry. I think at the time they should have been very much more transparent about exactly where, you know, and who received X amount of money. Did all of that go to the charity? Did it not? Was there a fee for the voiceover person? Whatever. People have to be paid. I get it, so it's up to them. It's their business. But as the months went on, seemingly things didn't go to plan. And I can tell you that Harry got an absolute blasting behind the scenes because he didn't necessarily deliver the thing that Meghan thought she was going to get, which was, let's not forget, more acting work. And this goes back to exactly what I said at the start of the video. Her Majesty the Queen said you could carry on, perhaps voiceover work, stuff like that. And Meghan saw herself a little bit like Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, but in the reverse, right? When you think, you know, the beautiful Grace Kelly literally went to a marriage with a very successful career. She was giving something up. But Meghan had decided that she was very similar to Princess Grace. And she too was giving something up. You get the picture. She was giving nothing up, right? But that was the deal. And so she figured, well, she could do stuff like Disney because they couldn't be offended by that. And some deal could be worked out monetary wise. And at this point, they hadn't had the rejection from Her Majesty the Queen about exactly why they couldn't be half in, half out. Meghan wanted to present the Disney thing as a way of saying, this is the deal. You see what I'm saying? And that's truly what happened to that whole Disney debacle. And even to this point, to this day, nothing's truly come together. Disney seemingly gone cold on the idea of Meghan Markle becoming this cheese of their brand. And of course, she's now ploughing ahead, going back to her roots, as she says, which are the TIG. But of course, that certainly is not going to bring in the dough, a little bit like the Disney could have done. But seemingly, Bob Iger, a lot of problems with Snow White and Rachel Zegler right now. So he's certainly not going to be interested in taking on another demanding diva. One who's in her 40s and even doing voiceover work doesn't necessarily have the platform or the prestige to bring in a cinema audience or indeed a streaming audience, as we've seen very much demonstrated with her own Netflix deal. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.